What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to make a video talking about why the UFC middleweight division is probably the deepest division and just the most exciting division right now inside the UFC. I understand that we got fighters like Ilia Topuria coming up, Alex Pereira, but when we look at probably the deepest division with so many different fighters going on, that top 10 of that middleweight division and people underneath that in like the top 15, like Shara Bullet, who just moved up there. We got fighters like Paulo Costa, who's so fun. Someone like Jared Cannonier, who's lost 2 fights in a row, but those fights being to Nasruddin Imavov and Caio Borralho. Just such an incredible fight. But today I kind of want to talk about the UFC middleweight division, or probably why it is the killer division inside the UFC, of how every single fighter in that top just 10 just can't afford to lose right now, of how that is the most up in the air division in the entire UFC. But if you guys enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best way to help the channel grow. And while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications just so you guys are always notified about future UFC content releasing every single day. But without further ado, let's jump right into the video talking about why the UFC middleweight division is probably the hardest, closest, and just most ruthless division right now inside the UFC. The UFC middleweight division right now is probably the deepest division if you look at that top 10. Now, the top 10 of the middleweight division has fighters, as we all know. Dricus du Plessis, Khamzat Chimaev just beat Robert Whittaker. Israel Adesanya, Sean Strickland, Caio Borralho, Nasruddin Imavov, Paulo Costa, Jared Cannonier. So many amazing fighters in there, but truly, these fighters are going to have to fight one another, and some of them are going to lose, and that makes for some of the most exciting fights right now inside the UFC. If we look at the next title shot, we have Dricus du Plessis probably is going to be obviously fighting for the title, but then you either have Sean Strickland or Khamzat Chimaev. Sean Strickland has not lost a middleweight fight, unless it was to Alex Pereira, who knocked him out, and Dricus du Plessis when he lost in the main event of that UFC 279 card, and to Jared Cannonier, who was amazing at that time. Also, other people like Khamzat Chimaev. If Khamzat fights Dricus, both of them can't win. So one of those fighters is going to have to lose. And that's why I'm saying right now that the UFC middleweight division is an absolute just crazy thing in general. We look at Brendan Allen, who was on a tear in the middleweight division, and he went up against Nasruddin Imavov, and he lost that fight. And that was crazy to see, considering of how good of a fighter Brendan Allen even is. Marvin Vettori hasn't fought for a very long time. And he is an incredible fighter. You know, the UFC middleweight division is just so deep in every aspect. You look at these fights that you could possibly make. Nasruddin Imavov versus Israel Adesanya is up reportedly in the works. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, but I think that's the fight to be made. You do Caio Borralho versus Sean Strickland. I think that would be an incredible fight to be made. Do maybe like Robert Whittaker versus Brendan Allen would be a fun fight. Roman Dolidze would be a fun fight. Something like that. And you would just keep making these fights back and forth. But when you look at all these fights, all these guys are on win streaks. They're doing incredible things. Imavov's running through the UFC. The only person he's lost to in recent memory is Sean Strickland. You look at Khamzat Chimaev, he's undefeated. You look at Caio Borralho, he just mauled Jared Cannonier and hasn't fought like the competition of some of these guys, but it's such a skilled fighter. Even fighters like Israel Adesanya, he's lost to Dricus du Plessis, but I don't know if he's going to lose to a lot of these other fighters. I think that this middleweight division is an absolute bloodbath. And who could really take the strap off of Dricus du Plessis? Because that Sean Strickland fight was very close. A lot of people I know think that Strickland won that fight against Dricus. I know Adesanya did have a very good fight until that 4th round where he got submitted against Dricus du Plessis. Robert Whittaker had that fight even though he came off just losing to Chimaev this weekend off an incredible choke that broke his jaw. But Chimaev hasn't fought the names of a lot of these other guys except Robert Whittaker, which he did in incredible fashion. He beat Whittaker, one of the best middleweights the UFC has ever seen. Imavov, Borralho haven't fought the level of competition, but Jared Cannonier under both of their belts is a great win. How is this middleweight division going to really go down? And I got to say this, I still do think that Dricus du Plessis is kind of the favorite to rule and run the division. The only person that I could really see taking the belt off of him is kind of like a video that I made the other day, and that's Khamzat Chimaev, but I could also see Caio Borralho kind of take the belt off him as well. Now, Caio is a very, very, very good fighter. Not a lot of people know about Mr. Borralho, even though he is from that Fighting Camp Nerds. He is truly one of the best middleweights in the planet Earth. He went in there and absolutely mauled Jared Cannonier in a very dominant fight at that UFC event. I think it was at the end of August, and that was a very, very, very interesting fight. Cannonier came off, I shouldn't say short notice. This fight was kind of booked relatively short notice, maybe 4 or 6 weeks notice, but truly both those fighters went in there, have massive wins. Borralho is now in the top 6, and Jared Cannonier is number 8. But a lot of these fighters have so much skill inside the organization. I know all these different fighters carry the baggage with them to really just show and beat any person on a given day. And even when you look at individuals of people who are lower in the UFC middleweight division, you got some absolute studs down there. Namely, someone who just beat Michel Pereira, Anthony Hernandez. Michel Pereira is a stud himself, but Anthony Hernandez, he beat Roman Ankalaev and Michel Pereira. Two absolute killers in the middleweight division, and he is only number 13 right now. You give him someone like Jared Cannonier, Marvin Vettori, Robert Whittaker even. I think Anthony Hernandez is an absolute star in the middleweight division. Looking at Magomed, who just had the double spinning back fist KO at UFC 308 this week versus Armen Petrosyan, and that was an incredible knockout. And even guys like Paulo Costa, Roman Dolidze, they might not be the flashiest fighters, but they still can go in there and work to get wins. The middleweight division is being severely overlooked. I know it might not be the most skilled division. When we're talking about skill for skill, obviously the featherweights, the bantamweights, the lightweights, even the flyweights, and probably not the welterweights, but a lot of these different divisions are more skilled for them. They can throw different shots. They got to rely on their speed more. Now, the middleweight division is so scary because you got these fighters who are not only so strong, but they're also super skilled. I know Dricus Du Plessis throws shots all around. He looks like a crazy man when he's out there, but you can't lie. Dricus is the champion for a reason. He's done everything right. He's genuinely came out there and has done an amazing job going in there to win fights and do other things. Sean Strickland, former champion, one of the greatest kickboxers I think we've ever seen inside the UFC. He's got that boxing style to where he would go in and beat some actual professional boxers, in my opinion. Adesanya, former champion. Hamza Chimaev, probably going to be a future champion. Robert Whittaker, former champion. Imavov's got future, he's maybe a future champion. Borralho, I think, is going to be a future champion. I think there's so many future, former, and just potential in the UFC middleweight division right now to genuinely outwow there to be a massive, massive thing going on inside the organization. Everyone's overlooking the middleweight division. We got so much activity going on with Hamzat fighting, Whittaker just that fight getting done. Also, Adesanya is looking to return at Sydney this year, and it's either going to probably be Borralho or Imavov. Also, we got Strickland, who probably isn't going to fight for the title because Hamzat just won. That would be a great fight for Borralho. Also, guys like Cannonier and Vettori are probably going to be welcoming up these studs in the lower part of the division, namely like Anthony Hernandez or Magomedov. A lot of these different fighters are going in there to be some of the greatest inside the UFC middleweight division. And with the combination of great talent in the bottom tier of the top 15, namely Anthony Hernandez, Magomedov, and Michel Pereira, even though he lost to Hernandez in his last fight, and you still got absolute just great middleweights in the top 10. Cannonier, Brendan Allen, Roman Dolidze, Marvin Vettori, Kyle Borralho, and much, much more in the more namely individuals like Dricus, Sean, Adesanya, Chimaev, Whittaker, all these different guys inside that middleweight division are absolute studs, and I just truly think that the UFC middleweight division is not only one of the deepest, most fun, but it's just such a big question mark inside the UFC right now. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please let me know what you think down below in the comment section about this take that the UFC middleweight division is kind of being overlooked and undervalued right now. I think the UFC middleweight division is one of the deepest divisions right now inside the organization, with fighters coming up and winning big like Anthony Hernandez and Magomedov going to make a push into the top 10, and you got your studs who have been around for a long time, namely Adesanya, Whittaker, Strickland, and newcomers coming into the middleweight top 5 and top 10, namely Nasruddin Imavov, Kyle Borralho, Brendan Allen, even though he lost to Imavov in his last fight. This UFC middleweight division is stacked and truly is going to be one of the best divisions for a very long time coming. And even though a lot of fighters are saying that, or a lot of individuals are saying that the UFC middleweight division isn't at its best state right now, I do think that this is the best UFC middleweight division that the UFC has had in a very, very long time. Well, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That it's the best way to help the channel grow. And while you're down there, please turn on the post notifications just so you guys are always notified and updated when UFC content releases every single day. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon with more UFC content and news.